Hello everyone. So recently I had a video comparing the OMD EM-5 with the Sony NEX-5N. But a fair comparison would be to use the NEX-7 instead. So here we go. In this video I'm going to compare the OMD with the NEX-7. So first I want to talk about the handling of the two cameras. So first up is the OMD. So most important thing in handling, in my opinion, is the grip. And here the OMD is a bit lacking in that it's pretty thin. There's a small ridge here. There is a battery grip you can buy on top of this. That's $300, and it'll make this more substantial. But by itself, it feels not very secure. It's definitely doable, and it's not very straining. But the grip could be improved. In terms of the buttons and the dials, these two are very logically placed, and the buttons are very small, as you can see over here. So sometimes you have to be more intentional or more precise when you try to press a button. There is a mode dial here, so this is explicit. You can know which mode you're in. You can change it very quickly without delving into the menu. And the EVF is centered to the lens, so this is very I guess an old style way of putting the EVF. And if you are like some people, your nose could smudge against the screen depending on how you use the EVF. I personally don't have that problem. So yep, that's for the OMD. For the NEX-7, first thing you notice is the grip is a lot more substantial. So this is very beefy. You can grip it very securely. There's a bit of a thumb rest here too. And in my opinion, it's a lot more comfortable. This is probably how the OMD feels with the battery grip. So also the EVF, as you can see here, is moved to the left, and in my opinion it's a more logical placement. It might be aesthetically less pleasing, but that's up to the person. But in this way, if you use your right eye, then your nose will be here and then it wouldn't interfere with the screen. So that's nice. Also, you notice there is no mode dial. Instead, you get a pop-up flash. So this flash comes out mechanically. This is, I like the pop-up flash in the way that sometimes with the OMD I wish I had the clip-on flash, but I don't have it with me, just for fill flash. And in those scenarios, a pop-up flash would be very useful. So let me do a quick size comparison of the two cameras. So here's the back. It's about the same size. And side view, you'd have to not mind the difference in the lens sizes because they are different lenses. So thickness is about the same. On the top, OMD's top looks a lot busier. Also this is silver, so it tends to look busier than black. On the right side you see the difference in the grip, right? So at the bottom you can see that as well. The grip on the NEX-7 is a lot beefier. And the NEX-7's body is also thinner. Not that it matters a whole lot because the lens really takes up most of the space. So there you go. And I know this has a lens on it, but when I just have the body, the OMD also feels heavier. Next thing I want to talk about is the build of the two cameras. So both are made out of magnesium alloy with some plastic. However, the OMD feels a little more substantial than the NEX-7. It feels heavier. I think it's because either it has more components in there or the alloy is thicker. But this does feel slightly more flimsy compared to the OMD in person. So this feels just really solid, and the metals, you feel like they're really sturdy. Whereas here, it feels kind of, I don't know, like it's a little empty, but that's really up to user preference. It's a close call between the two. However, a major difference is the OMD is weatherproof. So it's weather sealed on a lot of the lines around the camera body, so it can shoot in rain or in dusty areas, whereas the NEX-7 is not weather sealed and could prove problematic in those situations. Now in terms of button layout, the things I like about the OMD are the mode dial, which is right here. You can change it very easily, and the fact there are two function buttons that you can assign a multitude of different functions to them. You can even change the record buttons function. The thing I don't like is the size. So they're very small, as you can see. They're tiny, and they feel kind of mushy as well, which is probably due to the weather sealing. And also, I don't like the power button, power switch, which is right here. So on off, you have to toggle like this. So it's like when you're shooting, you can't turn it on and off very quickly. You have to kind of hold it with the left hand and then turn on, turn off, and then go back to shooting. So on the NEX-7, the things I like, well, I like that the power button's right here, so you can turn on and off very easily, just while you're shooting. There is a function button. The record button cannot be changed, so you might accidentally press this when you're shooting pictures. The buttons are pretty configurable, so you can get it to be configured in such a way that it's very easy for you to use. One thing is that there is no mode dial. So I think I mentioned this before, but you have to press the center button to go into the menu and then change it like this. It's not a huge deal, but if you want to change it very quickly or just see what mode you're in, I guess you can read here, but it's just easier when there's a mode dial here. But I guess there's no more room on this camera, is there? So another important part of the camera is the screen. So the Olympus OMD has a tiltable screen that comes out like this and rotates like that. The Sony screen is very similar, so it tilts out and then it goes like this. However, looking at the hinges and the thickness of the two, the OMD's one is a lot sturdier and actually harder to turn than the Sony's. Also, let me turn these on. So the screen on the OMD is 610,000 dots, I believe, and the one on the NEX-7 is 920,000 dots. However, even though it's more dots, part of the screen, like you can see here, is covered up by the control, just instruction of which button is what. So in reality, you don't have too much of a difference in terms of number of dots showing shown on the screen. And also the OMD screen is touchscreen, so that could prove useful in some situations. For example, you can touch shutter, you can touch a spot, and the camera will take a picture. So it's very useful for waist level shooting. And this one is not touchscreen. So I personally don't use touchscreen very much, so it's not a factor to me, but to some users it might prove a major difference. So the next thing is the EVF. On the OMD, the EVF has 1.4 million dots, whereas on the NEX-7 is 2.4 million dots. So you might think that's a huge difference, but in actuality, I don't see that much of a difference when using them. So the 1.4 I think is sufficient. And one thing is that the EVF inside the NEX-7 is much larger, so you have a greater magnification factor than the one in the OMD. However, this becomes a problem of sorts, because if you wear eyeglasses or if your eye is a little too far from the EVF, then the image inside that you see starts to blur at certain corners because the angle to your eye is different compared to parts of the image where it's closer than farther. So it presents some sort of a problem. And also the proximity sensor is not as good as on the OMD. OMD, you don't have to be, I feel like when I wanted to switch, it does switch, whereas on the NEX-7 sometimes there's more of a delay. Sometimes I have to get actually closer to it for it to switch. So even though there's more dots on the NEX-7 EVF, I actually prefer in actual usage the OMD's EVF.